Hello, welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden Williams here, and Man in the Mirror is a podcast where each week I talk to a male guest about life, about work, about some of the key items on their bathroom shelf, and we discuss self-care, self-image, and what they really think about the man that stares back at them in the mirror. Now, this week, my guest is Nicola Pozzani, who is creative director of fragrance brand Merchant of Venice. I met Nicola in the summer. He was doing an in-store for one of the brand's new launches, and we got to meet in person. But then actually we recorded the podcast separately, remotely after that. But such a lovely man who has a really interesting story in that he's involved in fragrance education. He's the creative director of a big fragrance brand, but Merchant of Venice also have a museum in Venice. So he, as you'll hear in the discussion, you know, he's really interested in the history of fragrance as well. So, and on top of that, he's also a qualified yoga teacher. A real joy to spend some time with, a real lovely, warm energy. And I learned a lot about the brand. I learned about the significance of Italy in terms of fragrance, which I say we often dismiss slightly and focus more on France as the sort of home of fragrance. But Italy has a long and storied history in terms of fragrance, which Nicola will tell us more about. So here we go. It's Nicola Pozzani, who is the creative director of Merchant of Venice, chatting to me, Hayden, on the Man in the Mirror podcast. Let's go. Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden Williams here, and I'm delighted to tell you that today I'm joined by Nicola Pozzani, who is the creative director of Merchant of Venice. Hi, Nicola. How are you?
Hello. I am very good. Thank you. And I'm very excited to be here with you today. Thank you for your lovely invite.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, and I'm delighted to have you on the show. We met back in the summertime. I popped along to see you in Harrods before you were doing an event, so we got to meet each other in person. But it looked like you were launching some very exciting things that day, and I'm sure we'll get into that and talk about some of the new products in the Merchant of Venice range. But I know the listeners, as would I, would love to hear a bit more about the man himself and your background. So I'd love to know. I mean, maybe the listeners can detect an Italian accent, but what was your background with fragrance? How did you end up getting involved in the world of perfume? Was it an interest from a very young age?
Not at all, actually. I was very much into fashion in my early 20s, and I moved to Milano, which is, the fashion epicenter in Italy. But I soon realized that I was more interested in fragrance. I actually attended a school that was funded by a fashion photographer, so I did study fashion.
Right.
And although I was, obsessed at a very young age with all these fashion magazines, actually most of them London fashion magazines. So I was an avid collector of The Face, Dazed and Confused. Absolutely. I was spending all of my pennies buying all these glossy magazines.
It's funny though, isn't it? When you think about magazines now, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's so much of the culture. But like you, I remember, I mean, my interests were more music, but there's something really special, isn't there, about those glossy magazines and sort of poring over them and taking all your information. I don't know. Maybe that's still around. Obviously, there's great magazines, but it was a real, much more of a thing, wasn't it, in the 90s and noughties?
Well, at the time, I guess that was the main way to consume image for everyone.
Yeah.
In the early 20s, there was no Instagram, or internet had just started. So the only way to kind of be inspired was to go through to the fashion magazines if you were into photography, into clothing, into self-expression. And that for me was kind of actually what then made me aware of fragrance being a vehicle for self-expression.
And where did you grow up, Nicola?
So I grew up in a very, very beautiful Shakespearean town called Verona.
Ah, yes. How lovely.
Not too far from Venice, just around the corner.
Yeah.
So I'm from the same region as the Merchant of Venice. Then when I was in my early 20s, I kind of escaped first to Miami, where I lived for some time with a friend.
Oh, did you?
And then in the year 2000, It was some of the happiest moment of my life. And then Milano, which is where my creative soul very much was born, at this amazing School of the Five Senses, where I got the chance to answer your question, to study with French master perfumer, Jean-Claude Deléna, who is the guy that very much inspired me and changed my life and made me aware that that was what I wanted to do in life.
I mean, he's a legend of the industry, isn't he?
Yes. And at the time, I think he was being made into a legend. So in a way, I guess it was interesting to meet him at the time when, it was right at the time when he left the fragrance house we were sponsored by to then join Hermès. So it was, I think, a peculiar moment in his career as well.
Right. So your interest kind of started through the worlds of sort of fashion and media and sort of imagery, but then did it come, the love of fragrance came through study and this
yes,
course on the five senses?
Yeah, because the whole concept of the school was based in synesthesia. So how to very much express a story and emotion, a sensation through all the five senses and the links between the five senses. So fragrance was one of the areas of study as much as photography was. And so some of the projects would be to translate a scent in image, for example, or to translate a sound in scent. And so that was very creative. And that is when I got to experiment with fragrance.
I love those ideas. Yeah, and I think that, it's always so interesting. Of course, our sense of smell, is inspired by other things. That must have been such a fascinating area of study to bring the different senses together like that.
But also because, quite frankly, we're all educated visually.
Yeah.
Somehow I think we are exposed in school to all of the five senses, but no one is really exposed to the sense of smell. So
it's true.
Came as a revelation because I had never, other than worn fragrance, I had never smelled raw materials or even contemplated the idea of a perfumer job, So
yeah.
It was a completely unknown world to me, like it is to most people, actually.
And of the different areas of study, was it the world of olfaction and smell that took your interest the most?
Oh, absolutely, yes. When Jean-Claude came to, I will never forget the first time he came to school, and he was coming from Grasse just to teach us all the time. And the moment he arrived, and literally he completely captured my attention and inspired me so much. And we were actually very lucky because the whole school was financed by a fragrance house. So we had then, the opportunity to experiment and to work immediately. The president of the corporation was there as well. So we were being so inspired. We were so lucky being exposed to, again, a world, an industry that most people really don't know, have no clue exists and how it works. Because when you sometimes say to, meet someone and they ask you what you do and you say you work as a perfumer or you start in a fragrance house, they wouldn't know what that means.
People can't really get their head around it. And as you say, and also it's in the fact that it was an academic study, but that you had a real life commercial opportunity to see how the industry itself worked. That must have been invaluable to see people doing day-to-day work in that industry.
Absolutely. Also because you may imagine the school was still is very unique in the world. And so we had the greatest luck of meeting and studying with some of the, world's best teachers and professionals. So the type of, you would never know, who you would bump into. You would go there one morning and you would find Isabella Rossellini. And
oh my goodness.
Like, oh God, what's happening here? Oh yeah, we're launching a new fragrance. So you would never know, one of our teachers, a sound designer, was a student of David Lynch. So it was like every day there was an amazing surprise.
That must have been really stimulating as a creative person, having all those different creative people around.
It was absolutely amazing.
And you've kept in the world of education, haven't you, Nicola? You still, teaching is a big part of what you do, and you're still someone that likes to educate the next generation, aren't you?
Well, I think because I have being educated, and I've had this amazing experience in this school that was called Università dell'Immagine in Milano. Somehow I feel very passionate about inspiring people and nurturing new talent. And this is, I guess, was the approach of my teachers. And so I think I subconsciously have inherited that.
Yeah.
And I would say most of my time, clearly, these days is dedicated in the creation of fragrances, but there's, I would say, maybe 10, 15% my time a year is spent in different universities around Europe, around Italy, the UK, and Switzerland, where I've had the opportunity to create some courses which very much, some of them want to inspire people through fragrance. And I'm saying, when I say people, I mean courses open to everyone.
Yeah.
Where basically we're having a very, very broad spectrum of participants, which is what I do here in the UK. Whereas in Italy, I teach in more specialized perfumery courses. So it's quite interesting to see the difference in between people that are there to suddenly become perfumers and people that are there because maybe they are marketeers or they are coming from advertising, coming from other backgrounds, and they just want to explore with the sense of smell. Artists, work with lots of artists here in London and in Switzerland. But at the end of the day, they're all very much... I think they all share the same enthusiasm for fragrance.
Yeah, and curiosity about the world of perfume.
Yeah, I think when you educate people on a sense of smell, I personally enjoy it a lot. It's really magic because you kind of see their soul being born again.
Yeah.
Which is maybe what I had myself, when I first became aware of, there is this amazing sense that up until now I had underestimated. And it's so beautiful, it's so rich, and it can, it allows me to get to know aspects of myself as well as my own story. And I think it's the same thing that happens with the students.
Well, I can totally relate to that too. I think it's something that when that interest takes hold and the bug bites, it can bite pretty deep, and it becomes something that's very important, and brings out different things about your character and different interests. And I've over the last few years loved, and it's my kind of fragrance journey, I suppose, is quite early, though only over the last few years. But I just find it endlessly fascinating talking to creative people like yourself and finding out more about the world around it. But also, I think, as you say, it triggers something inside you as well, doesn't it? And brings out different emotions and feelings. And I think it's very special.
We'll have to get you to one of our courses. We're teaching a course every year in... so as part of this unique partnership with Merchant of Venice, we have a partnership with the ISIPCA, Université de Versailles. So that is some teaching that both myself and the founder, Mark Vidal, do as part of the for a master course. But in the summer, we're also teaching a short course about perfumery in a beautiful Venetian Palazzo Mocenigo, which is a perfume museum in Venice.
Yes, so that's very nicely linked. Is that the museum that's owned by the Merchant of Venice company?
Yes, precisely. So that's an incredibly unique place that was actually my link to the Merchant of Venice. I discovered this fantastic museum some 10 years ago, and I thought, this sounds interesting because, Italy is, unlike the French, has not been particularly good at preserving and promoting their perfume heritage. And this was actually the first time that someone decided to do something about it. And so this is the first perfume museum in Italy, and it celebrates very much the history of Venice as a place for perfumery.
Right. And did the Merchant of Venice fragrance brand come after the museum? Did it work that way around, or was
it's kind of the result of the partnership between this family of perfumers, of Venetian perfumers, that of course Merchant of Venice is part of, and the state museums, so the local museums of Venice, who have joined the family in this very unique partnership, and they have refurbished this amazing palazzo that was like a few buildings in Venice a bit run down. It costs a lot of money to keep a palazzo going.
I can imagine that, yeah. And that was your introduction to the world of the Merchant of Venice and where you are now. So did you get involved with them 10 years ago then, early in the sort of foundation of the company, or did you come to it a bit later on?
No, it's been a couple of years that I work with them, but I met them some 10 years ago. I'd just come back from Saudi Arabia, where I lived previously on another perfume project. And I found out about reading literally on the newspaper in Italy. I was back home visiting family in Verona, and I read about this Perfume Museum opening in Venice. So I immediately went there, and I got the chance to meet Marco, who told me a little bit about history.
It's almost meant to be. It sounds like it was if there was a role that was meant for you, Nicola, it sounds like this one.
Yeah, and I've always been based in London for nearly half my life. So Marco has always been coming regularly to the UK because, of course, UK is one of the main countries where Merchant of Venice sell their fragrances.
Yeah.
And but this year it's a 10th year anniversary, which is quite a milestone. And so we've been keeping in touch throughout the years. He's a lover also of the English countryside, so he comes very regularly. Yeah, and then a couple of years ago, he asked me whether I was interested in helping to create all of their fragrances. And I thought, well, this sounds like a beautiful opportunity to blend perfume fragrance with history and culture, which is something that I personally like very much.
Well, it sounds like a kind of a marriage made in heaven, this role. And we'll talk more about the Merchant of Venice and some of the products that are in the market at the moment. But if I could talk about some of your bathroom essentials, as I always do on Man in the Mirror, I'd love to know, are you a kind of person that has an extensive morning and evening sort of skincare and grooming routine? What kind of products do you like to use, Nicola?
Not really, to be honest with you. My skin routine is quite basic. Actually, I'm not sure that basic is the right word, but I mean, actually, upon reflection, I don't think it's that basic. But I mean, up until recently, I was just cleansing and moisturizing. But in the last few years, as I have recently embraced a new decade, I have started using these amazing anti-aging products, which I am finding quite interesting. But what's very interesting is the fact that the reason why I started to use them is not because I wanted to use an anti-age. It's because I was using them as a post-shaving remedy.
Oh, okay. And did you find did it work well? Sort of calm the skin down? Yeah.
Yes, because unfortunately, I've always had this problem with shaving, which is whenever I shave, it's a bit like a murder scene. So there's
I love that.
Always
blood everywhere.
I remember you and I had this conversation before, and I'm actually encouraging, if there's beauty people out there who are listening to this, especially the very big, beauty groups, I think some more effort should be made on the concept of men's shaving products. Because personally, I have tried so many different tools and products in my life, and I find them very primitive and or at least they don't work with my skin, or maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know, but it's just, it always upsets my skin, whatever product I'm doing, whatever I'm using. And luckily, I was at the airport killing some time. I spent quite an awful amount of time in airports these days. Yeah. And I use that time, maybe like you, I love actually being in airports, because for me, it's a bit of market research. So you go there and
go and see what's
things,
new.
Smell. Especially Heathrow T5, which has that humongous beauty and perfume.
So good.
It's great, isn't it?
So what did you find? What were the products?
Well, I've always kind of been a fan of Estée Lauder products and brands in general. I find them very well put together. I also had a brief work experience with them in the past.
Okay.
And this beauty specialist was telling me that all of her, like her father, her brother, so all of the men in her family were using this product as a post-shaving remedy.
Yeah.
And when she said that, I thought, oh, okay, she just wants to sell, the product.
Yeah.
But she was right, because actually I've been using this serum. It's a serum after shaving. And I must say that it really helps a lot to kind of, stop the irritation.
Yeah. And is that the advanced night? Is it advanced night repair?
And I must say, amongst everything that I've tried in my life, it's the only thing that basically tames. So there's no, redness spots, things that come out after I use this. So
that's good.
That has become kind of like a must-have in my, especially if after shaving I'm going like for a meeting or to meet someone, because otherwise it looks like I've been beaten up.
So it's a bit of a game changer.
Yes.
And in terms of your cleansing, are you loyal to a certain product, Nicola? In terms of the earlier steps, in terms of sort of cleansing and moisturizing, are there certain products you like to use, or are you kind of happy to try different things?
No, I have been using, and often also I travel, so it's a bit difficult for me to stick to the same product. Sometimes I just buy things at the airport, I buy smaller packaging. So with that, I'm kind of experimenting. But I think it's more the serum that I tend to stick to and use all the time.
And what kind of skin have you got? Is it kind of combination, or is it quite dry or oily? What do you think?
I think it's a combination, because, most of my skin actually I find quite dry, which is maybe why it kind of is so sensitive to shaving, I guess. But then I realized once I went to a beautician, and she explained to me that she said it's a combination.
Right. Well, maybe, as you're saying about the products and not finding the ideal men's kind of shaving products, maybe it's something that Merchant of Venice or one of the companies within your family should be suggesting it. Some new men's products.
Actually, they did launch a collection.
Oh, did they?
Yes, last year. In fact, I'm using one of their oils. So what I love about that collection is that there is this beautiful pre-shaving oil.
Is this from Merchant of Venice?
Yes, which is also very nicely scented. And that actually is something that helps before shaving.
Right.
Because it kind of moisturizes and I think softens your skin, and it's very nicely scented. So it's a pre-shaving oil that I use.
Good. Yeah.
And so there's all sorts of new remedies that I am finding.
Oh, that's good.
But I also think...
Oh, sorry, I was going to ask you about your hair and whether you have certain products you use in your hair, Nicola.
So this is an interesting question, because I have curly hair. So there are supposed to be specific shampoos for curly hair. And I tend to kind of choose those ones. Although I find in the UK, there must be fewer people with curly hair, because it's very difficult to find, shampoos specifically for curly hair. When you get to Italy or Spain, there's so many. It's so easy to find specific products for curly hair. So I find this must be because there's fewer curls, I guess.
Maybe.
I try to use them, and I try not to wash my hair too much, although I think living in London is very difficult.
So you try to have some days where you don't wash?
Well, interestingly enough, I've recently come across this hairstylist who was kind of suggesting that we shouldn't be using shampoo, but we should be only using water, and then every now and then use conditioner.
That's it. So I have days where I won't shampoo. I'll shampoo every other day, but I'll condition every day. And someone told me that. I mean, I don't know if that's
see,
scientific.
So maybe they're coming from the same school.
Yeah, maybe. And what about fragrance, Nicola? Because obviously you're someone that's working with fragrance all the time. Does that mean that in the morning you need to keep your skin clear of fragrance, or are you trying out new Merchant of Venice fragrances? How does it work in terms of your fragrance during the day?
So, well, I never use fragrance, of course, because I'm working on fragrance, so my nose needs to be clear. But I apply on my skin only things normally that I'm working on. So let's say, so now, for example, I've got about 20 fragrances on my desk at the moment that I'm evaluating on paper. And then I would also evaluate some of them on skin. So, especially the ones that, then become products. These, of course, are things that I constantly wear. So to answer your question, I use fragrance for pleasure very rarely. And I mostly put on my skin things that I'm working on.
Right.
So it's a bit of it's a funny way to use fragrance.
I've heard that a lot, though. I mean, it makes total sense for people who are working with fragrance day in, day out, that really, obviously, most of the time you need to be, trialing new things on your skin. I mean, do you ever, at the weekend, if you allow yourself a day off, is that a real pleasure where you can say, oh, I'm going to put a different fragrance on today? Are you ever allowed a kind of day off where you can say, oh, I'm going to try something new or try something else?
Well, I work in London, I work in Venice, I work in a lot of different places. And so there's always fragrances around me.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of always surrounded by fragrance. And I must say that sometimes it's good to maybe have one day or, 2 days where I'm off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So totally. I'm not smelling anything. I am just focusing on other aspects of life and just doing my own thing. So it's important, I think, to also have that detachment. But having said that, most of my days are very much surrounded by fragrances, especially when I'm developing something new. So I'm constantly smelling. And this is also the process of so-called evaluation. So you basically evaluate a fragrance over an amount of time. So
as you develop to get towards the final one, yeah.
So you repeatedly smell raw materials, and then you smell a raw material, an idea comes to mind, and you take notes and you go back to it and you compare it with another raw material.
Yeah.
So it's lots of smelling. But going back, to your question on beauty, what I wanted to mention, you were talking about a daily routine.
Yes.
And to me, actually, looking after your skin, so the kind of like the external beauty, is only one aspect. So I think that, to quote something that someone has said before me, which is beauty also comes from within. So I think, at least with me, maybe I spend more time on looking after what's inside, meaning I'm trying as much as possible to focus on well-being, on what the food I eat, and also practices.
Because you're a yoga teacher, aren't you, Nicola?
Yes. So I've had a lifelong yoga and meditation practice, and I find that to be very powerful as well. So to me, that is what I would call part of my beauty routine.
Yeah, of course. More holistic.
Which I try to do, maybe not every day, but at least every other day. So I find it incredibly useful, like I'm sure a lot of people do, to be who I am, and then also to bring my best self to the world out there, together with all of my, of course, beauty and skin routine.
Of course. And do you find that the yoga and the wellness side is really part of keeping you centered, and it's obviously a big part of who you are? Does it really help with your relaxation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But not only that, I think in general, keeping an active lifestyle, exercising regularly, for me, walking, to me, that is just so much important. It keeps me going. It keeps me alive. Yeah. Without that, I get quite unhappy, I must say. For time on my life, so I live in London. One of the things I love about living in London is that you don't need a car.
Yeah, that's true.
So the fact that I walk everywhere, I take public transport, and I have the chance to just move, my feet and my legs, to me, that is like a gift from heaven. Because when I go to Italy, often I have to drive.
Right.
And especially when I go and visit family, there's no, such good public transport. And for me, maybe because I've lived now nearly half of my life here, I find, and I've also lived in big cities, Milan, New York, So I'm finding the concept of sitting in a car very unfriendly.
Yeah.
And I got pain at some point. There was a time in my life where I had to drive for a few months and I developed a hip pain. Can you believe?
Really?
Yes, because I wasn't moving enough. And so the muscle on the hip shortened. And now I'm doing I have an amazing actually osteopath here in London. And also with the yoga that I've studied, I'm doing all these back bends that help me to sort of lengthen this muscle.
Yeah. That's
so
really interesting.
The yoga is really like a science.
Yeah.
That allows you to become more aware of your body, of what your body needs, of what your soul needs. And you can learn different techniques, different exercises, also with the meditation, with the breathing, that can make really a dramatic difference in your well-being, in your beauty.
Well, that's really interesting. And you mentioned food as well, obviously being an Italian man, but you consider, I think quite rightly, that food is part of wellness and making yourself feel good. And so you enjoy good food. Are you a cook, Nicola?
Well, I must say, with all this traveling, I'm not such a great cook anymore. But I tend to just do basic stuff.
Yeah.
But, they always take nutrition into account. So I'm always careful that I'm mixing, protein with carbs, with vegetables in the right way.
So you're quite mindful of all of that.
Oh, absolutely. But also, I think being brought up in Italy, that helps a lot because we're so easy. We've got fresh produce all around us.
Yes. Yeah. Very
so
lucky.
It's very easy to have access to fresh food, to good food. And I think that is something you inherit. And I kind of commute in between, Venice and London.
How lovely.
And when I go to Venice, it's absolutely incredible because maybe you don't know, very few people know this, but in Venice, they have a vegetable island.
Do they? I didn't know that.
Yes. So the San Palazzo Island is an island which the Venetian completely dedicated to the growing of fruit and veg. And this was something when I got to spend time there, that was actually during the last leg of COVID. It was amazing because I had COVID twice and I was everyone locked up in my apartment. And in London, you would order your online, whatever, delivery. And in Venice, you get this guy. So you need to know people because that's really fascinating. There is no such thing as, delivery, online delivery. You need to know the greengrocer, but the greengrocer from around the corner from this Campo San Giacomo, where I was living, which is so beautiful, would then bring himself. He would bring me, I would call him, and he would bring me the vegetables from San Erasmo Island, which I'm telling you, it's just...
Are they incredible?
Oh, my God. And some of it is just unique. You've got, for example, all these unique artichokes that they make over there. Yeah. So although I was having a miserable time, like everyone who had COVID, I was locked up in the apartment.
Okay. Yeah.
I had the most amazing food coming through the door and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm so lucky. Look at these tomatoes. Look at these potatoes. Look at this botoli, which are the local artichokes. And that is something that I say I love about Venice.
Yeah. And how often do you get to go, Nicola? Are you there a few times a year or more?
Every month.
Oh, every month. Okay.
Yes, wow. I'm going there every month, sometimes more than a month. So it's more than once a month. So it's a fantastic life in between what effectively is two islands, because UK is an island, Venice is an island. And also I think they have lots in common, having both been these two islands based on trade, on concept of empire. There's a lot of similarities between Venice and the UK.
Well, it's very interesting you should say that, and we should talk a bit more about the Venice and the Merchant of Venice brand. But as you say, I mean, there's so much rich history in terms of Venice and trade routes, and some of that is reflected in some of the fragrances you do. And obviously, this month you're launching a brand new fragrance called Gold Regatta. I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about that one, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Well, as you have rightly said, the whole concept of Merchant of Venice is very much drawing upon this incredibly rich history of the Republic of Venice, which was there for 1,000 years. So, Italy is, I always say Italy is a new recent project. Venice was there for 1,000 years. Can you believe? I mean, 1,000. This was a maritime republic built on trade. So, of course, fragrance was part of this trade. All these amazing perfume ingredients that were coming from the Middle East, from the Far East. Then you had this guy called Marco Polo, I'm sure you remember, who discovered a thing called musk that now we all know, in Europe. So fragrance has very much been part of this trading activity that the Venetians have been mastering. And Merchant of Venice very much celebrates all that. With regards to Gold Regatta, we are telling kind of a different story. So once a year, the first week of September, this amazing event called Regatta Storica takes place. So the Regatta Storica is one of the most unforgettable moments of Venetian life, where you've got on one side a competition, a rowing competition, and on the other side you have this beautiful boat parade in the Grand Canal.
Right.
So with all the traditions, it's a big show off.
Some of the old historic boats.
Yes. Yeah. And costumes. So you would have people in their own traditional costumes. Yeah. So when Marco kind of invited me to see that a few years ago, and I got to spend the whole afternoon there watching this incredible spectacle, which is very much performed by the Venetians. So it's a very authentic thing.
Yeah.
And we were on the last, coming out of COVID. So I was so impressed to see how much this atmosphere in the Regatta Storica was, to me, like a foreigner, because I'm not Venetian, but I got to observe and learn from the culture. To me, that became like a perfect metaphor for Venetian spirit, for this conquering spirit, for this energy, incredible energy that the Venetians have of, always going ahead and always being resilient to whatever happens, because Venice has always been threatened by the high tide, by invasions, by tourism nowadays.
Yeah.
So,
oh my goodness, cruise ships now.
Cruise ship. Well, now thank God they've been stopped. But
have they?
Always had, yes. But they've always had this kind of both fragile and very strong personality. Also, the ecosystem is like that. So I very much was conceiving a fragrance which resembles this going ahead in pursuit of beauty and victory and glory. And this is what we crafted with Gold Regatta, which is a fragrance I've made with a fantastic perfumer called Véronique Libert from Fragrance House Man. And
I got to smell it. And I got to smell it in the summer, and it's absolutely beautiful. Sorry, I interrupt.
No, it's good to know that you like it. Do you remember what mostly do you like about it?
Well, I obviously there was these beautiful marine notes, but I think you mentioned there was a seaweed note, which was perhaps something different I hadn't smelt before, but there's a beautiful fresh opening, but these really gorgeous kind of ozonic outdoor notes in it. I thought it was stunning and absolutely the kind of fragrance I love. So and the more you told me about the narrative and the story of Venice and the maritime history, I fell in love with it. So it's definitely one I'm going to seek out. Sorry, I interrupted your explanation, but I need to say it was great. Yeah.
To hear, because, I spent more than 1 year working on this, but it's nice to now have this
gorgeous
baby out there and to hear what people think about it, how people see it. And what you described is very much what we wanted to convey. So Vero and I got to spend some time in Venice, of course. And we were literally like smelling, Venice together. And I was pointing to some specific scents that I thought could be of particular interest for this project. And you mentioned the seaweed. That's correct. So this is one of the very few fragrances, as far as I know, that feature a red seaweed absolute. So it's a smell that on its own is quite peculiar. It is quite strong. It's a scent that alone you wouldn't want to wear as a perfume.
But
I can
when
it's blended with other notes, and here there's also a beautiful absolute of Madagascar vanilla. There is a very nice, warm, cozy, ambery aspect in it. So, it's a bit like Venice. In Venice, you have always a glorious, a beautiful, and aesthetically pleasing landscape around you, with the art, with the colors, with the history. But then you've also got the unexpected. And in the unexpected also fall some smells, because there are some scents about Venice that are maybe not so idyllic,
Yeah, I mean, it's on the water, isn't it, for a start? So
yes, but when it's all together, it's magic.
It is.
And that is also what very much reflects on this fragrance, which on one side has got the marine, the salty, the sea breeze. It is also a very nice summer fruity breeze, which is a very light fig note, which is
there's some fig
a tree that is from September. So September is the fig season. And so it falls specifically in the regatta time of the year. And then we use this note, which is very interesting, which is so-called driftwood. So this is, that Venice is built on water, but what not everyone knows is that it's built on wood. Right.
So the foundations are wood.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. So this was something very experimental that the Venetians did. They planted these colbricole, these long wooden pillars, in the mud. And they discovered that the interaction between the wood and the mud produces like a sort of chemical reaction, which is very solid. And it's so solid as a concrete, basically, that allows then a whole city to be built on it.
Right. And this was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Yeah.
Well, more than 1,000.
Yeah. Wow.
1,000, around 1,200, I guess. It was the anniversary of Venice some couple of years ago. So
incredible,
that's how they built. And so we thought that this concept of salty, wet woods was going to be part of it.
And that's very evocative anyway, isn't it? I think the idea of being on a pier or a boardwalk, that kind of slightly, aged wood that's been exposed to the elements. There's something really beautiful about that smell, isn't it? Where you take in the kind of the wood and the sea and the sort of ozonic, sunny smell. That's really special.
Well, being exposed to the elements is definitely a very beautiful way to describe Venice in general, because that is true. Exactly, you are an island in the Adriatic Sea. So you are literally exposed to the elements, to people, to cultures, because Venice has most possibly been the most open cross-culture place, maybe together with Sicily in Italy, which is another island again. So definitely a fragrance exposed to the element. I like that.
And it's so great to hear you describe Venice, and there's such a rich culture there. And of course, as you say, we often, rather lazily, we think about fragrance in Europe, and we're sort of drawn towards France. But it's fascinating to hear about the Italian culture of perfume, and now how it's being celebrated in Venice and at the museum.
Well, it's kind of what happened before France, because France, the French have been absolutely amazing at growing perfumery out of what was very much a Renaissance flair. Because, again, Venice was kind of the trading place of perfumery, but then those very, very few ones that would have used fragrance would have been the courts, all the royal courts up to Renaissance times. And one of them, Catherine de' Medici, she moved to France, married a French king, became Queen of France. And she fostered Grasse as a place for perfumery. And then the perfumers brought with her the Florentine perfumer Renato Bianco to Versailles. And that is when then France, became the center of perfumery. But what Merchant of Venice does is kind of celebrating everything that came before that. So this very long history around and before Renaissance times
Yeah. Oh, Nicola, it's really making me want to. I'd love to come and visit the museum in Venice.
Have to.
I bet it's absolutely fascinating, and I hope listeners are enjoying hearing more about it. I'd love to find out as well, as the name of the podcast being Man in the Mirror. I wonder, I'm always really interested in people's perceptions of their own image and how you feel about what you see when you look in the mirror. So I wonder, how comfortable are you with your appearance now? You mentioned you entered a new decade. So how do you feel about looking back at Nicola in the mirror these days?
Well, maybe it's also got to do with this new beautiful serums I'm using and and the yoga and the good food. But let me tell you,
you're getting younger and younger.
Yeah, well, lots of my friends are kind of mourning about the fact that, about getting older. But to be honest with you, I think in a way I'm having the best time of my life. It's, I'm not so nostalgic about my 20s. I think most people talk with much nostalgia about their 20s. I think 20s are great, but also a time when you're kind of a bit all over the place. You don't know where you're going.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm feeling, I guess, more and more stable and happy, and I feel I'm more grounded now. So I have.
Well, that's interesting.
I know myself definitely better, and I feel so lucky because I live in London, which has been my playground for a very long time, and I feel you are exposed to so many different people, culture. I do a job I love, which of course, helps a lot. So I'm very grateful for that. I don't take that for granted at all.
No, that is lucky for sure.
So I think I am in a very good position at the moment. And again, as far as one, I think, can really have then the chance to look after themselves, which is something that you learn. Because again, I think that's when you're in your 20s, maybe early 30s, you don't think about that very much. Maybe looking after yourself is something that you learn with age, I guess. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think that, quite rightly, in your 20s and 30s, you're forging a career and you're making families or whatever, but also you think you're invincible, don't you? So you're less focused on looking after yourself and repair and recuperation. Whereas I don't know. I think I'm older than you, Nicola, but I think I start to.
Who knows?
Really be grateful. Well, no, I certainly am. I'm 50, so I sort of feel grateful
but
for.
The soul is ageless,
No, it's true, but I feel. You get to a stage where you're grateful for what your body does, and I don't know. I think as you get older, I think experience. I'm not. I don't know. I'm not someone that's worried about getting older in terms of the exterior and my appearance. I think it's. I'm okay with all of that. I know. And obviously everyone approaches it in a different way, and some people want to kind of hold on to their youth and all those things, but I'm less bothered about that. But I'm, definitely.
I haven't done anything yet.
Would you? Do you think you'd ever sort of do any?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Everyone is doing that these days, so I'm quite amazed actually to see. We're talking about being in your early 20s. That what really shocks me is that apparently people in their 20s are doing that already.
Yeah. God, you're absolutely right, and making all these. Look, again. People do what they want to do, of course, but it does seem slightly strange, doesn't it? When you're the sort of prime of your youth,
because they don't need that. So
or doing things to lips and things.
Maybe. Well, I've been speaking with someone, beautician, who was telling me that a lot of people are doing that just to conform with everyone else, not because they need them, but if now everyone's got the same lips and the same forehead, then people want to have the same, although they don't actually need them because they don't need Botox at the age of 21.
It's quite depressing, isn't it, I think?
Well, I think it's interesting because in a way, I think it means that in the future, we're all going to have very different faces.
Yeah. But it's true. When you watch certain, there's programs here in the UK like Love Island and things like that. And I've discussed it on the podcast before. But as you say, that idea of uniformity and conformity, it does seem that there's a certain shape and a certain face shape and a certain aesthetic that people are, or the younger people, I'm generalizing hugely, but that's what they're aspiring to. And it does seem odd now that this idea of current beauty for young people is, this sort of bigger lips and sort of super smooth forehead. And I'm sure some of it comes from pornography or glamour, whatever it is. But it's, I wonder if it'll shift again. I'm sure it'll shift again at some point. But it just seems, that idea that everyone's going to look the same and that's what attractive is, does feel very repressive. And it didn't seem like it was like that before. But I think that's just the views of an older man, maybe.
Different generations just have different tools. And I think maybe
that's true.
We were more, listening to the same music or dressing, using the same clothes and speaking in the same tones as our peers. And maybe nowadays people use cosmetic surgery. At the end of the day, in the 80s, 90s, 2000, you really didn't have a young person, or very few people had access to cosmetic surgery. So now it's widely available. You can buy Botox injections at the pharmacy. So it's a very different world. I think what matters is that whatever people do that consciously, and they have the chance to so we're talking about beauty, find a way to be beautiful in their own way, which could be for some people, and I don't exclude that maybe in the future, who knows, I'll, do something as well. I think you need to take the wise decision for yourself in every life moment. So. And if that is what makes you happy and increases your happiness and your understanding of being beauty, I think for some people, maybe it's important to do that. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm certainly not, I'm not wanting to be prescriptive. And of course, everyone's got to do their own thing. You're absolutely right. I remember when we met though in the summer, Nicola, and, you were talking about, well, as we're talking about your appearance now, I think you've got incredible skin and you are incredibly young looking. And I wonder whether some of the things you were talking about in terms of the internal and the yoga and looking after yourself, both internally and externally, I think to me that really shone through. I think you look so well.
Oh, bless you.
No, I mean you've incredible skin and look very vital and
it's okay. I'm kind of doing my best, I guess. I think naturally very energetic. That helps a lot.
It's working for you.
Sometimes too energetic, I guess.
So to my final question, Nicola, what are the things that make you happy?
Oh, ooh la la, what question?
Ooh la la.
What are the things that make me happy? Definitely nature. So now I live in beautiful part of southeast London, surrounded by parks, and nature for me is absolutely mandatory. So I need to be in touch with nature. I need to go and touch the trees. I need to hear the wind moving the leaves, and
you're a tree toucher. Stop touching those trees.
Absolutely. So for me, nature is mandatory. I need to be in contact with nature. I need to be able to, again, look after myself, look after my body. I think that is an incredible privilege that then turns into happiness, because happiness is something that you create. It's not something it's a decision.
Yeah, it's not there automatically, is it?
No, I mean, there are things that help. There's loved ones, there's family, there's friends, there's love, and all of that clearly contributes. But I think it's a decision, a conscious decision that you take within yourself and that you can create with the things that you learn are good for yourself.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Totally.
So it's very much a decision. And I think curiosity is at the heart of happiness. So
I love that.
Like that expression, always be a student, kind of.
Yes. Yeah.
Always be keen to experience new things and meet new people, learning new cultures. That is something that happens a lot in my job as well, which I guess is why I love to work on fragrance. I love to work for heritage brands, because it helps to connect to humanity around you and to understand how humans have expressed their stories, their fashions, their way of being, their historical facts, also through something like fragrance, for example. So I guess that fragrance as well is something that makes me happy.
I think you absolutely demonstrated that sort of curiosity, and as you say, through the work you do and through the perfume and the museum, but also in your educating work, I guess, as much as you're helping the next generation, that process of teaching is always a two-way thing, isn't it? I guess you must be learning all the time and studying. So that's, it's fascinating.
Oh, yes. The energy I get back, especially with the students here in London from the Slade School of Fine Arts, where I do these scent workshops. I love it because you can see they're there to kind of tell their stories, express, their emotions. Art is all about emotions and personal stories. And fragrance then becomes very interesting to see how they use it. And then what I then get to experience the way they process it. And it's wonderful. And it's,
so you're getting something from it as well. It's not just a sort of one-way thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, Nicola, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to spend some time with you this morning.
Oh, thank you for your invite and all your beautiful questions.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, I shall put some program notes together on the podcast so people can find out a bit more about the products you use, and of course, a little bit more about the range from the Merchant of Venice, including Gold Regatta, which I absolutely loved and is out this month in a lot of major stores. So I shall put a link to the website where people can find out more about the brand. And it's been an absolute joy, and to hear about such a interesting job you have. And I say I'd love to need to get myself to Venice to find out more about the Merchant of Venice at the museum and hear about that rich history. Yeah. Well, you take care. Have a great day. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Lovely to chat with you.
You too, Nicola. Thank you. My thanks to Nicola. I really enjoyed chatting to him. Such a lovely man, and has a real sense of fun and playfulness, which I hope came across in the podcast. It's funny, I was talking about happiness and what made him happy, and Nicola mentioned curiosity, and I think you can totally see with the various roles he has, whether it's the creative direction of Merchant of Venice or his work in academia, or the research he does and the work he does with the museum, or even with the yoga teaching. I think, he's someone that's got curiosity at the heart of what he does, and it's a good thing. Keep curious. So thanks to Nicola. Really enjoyed that. If you want to find out more about the Merchant of Venice brand, you can do. Online, they're at themerchantofvenice.com, and on Instagram, it's at the Merchant of Venice. So just all one word, all as it sounds, themerchantofvenice.com and at the Merchant of Venice on Instagram, and you'll be able to find out about the whole range there. And also the Gold Regatta Eau de Parfum, which is out this month and is absolutely beautiful. If you want to find out more about Man in the Mirror, you can do. I'm on Instagram at Man in the Mirror Pod. There you'll find information about previous episodes, about what's coming up, and I talk about some of the products I like. So please give me a follow at Man in the Mirror Pod. And it would be great if you could give me a follow or a review at your podcast platform of choice, because it would be great just to put me up the rankings so that more people can find the podcast. So I really appreciate that. So look, thank you for your company this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you to Nicola. Thank you to you. And I'll see you next time on Man in the Mirror. Take care.